So you want to try something new, maybe a new technology, a tool, or a way of doing things at your church, but the boss ain't having it. Hey there, it's Matthew Warner, and this is the Finding Uno Show. Welcome to the Finding Uno Show. Who's Uno? Oh, you know Uno. He's that one lost sheep the shepherd leaves the 99 to go after, and we are here to help you find him. I'm your host, Matthew Warner, joined by my co-host, Matthew Sewell. How's it going, Matt?
Hey, good, as always.
Good to see you. I just want to remind everyone up front that we would love to get your questions for this. As you know, at the end, we have our segment, our People Got Church Problem segment, where we take a question from our listeners. So if you have a question or you have a topic that you'd like to see us cover on the show, don't be shy. You can head on over to our hotline on findinguno.com and submit your questions there. We would love to hear from you. Matt, today we are talking about this problem that I know anyone who's worked at a church has had, is the challenge of convincing your pastor or your boss or whatever role you may have to try something new. What do you think? What do you think are the main reasons that when you want to try something new, you get resistance from your boss or your pastor?
Yeah, when I thought of that, when I heard the topic, I instantly thought of the priest who was like our camp chaplain when I was a camp counselor in college. And he had this great line one time where he said, "It's not that people don't like change, it's that they don't like transition." Because if you change to something good, once you get on the other side of that, it's all hunky dory. But it's the transition going through it. And I know you've used an analogy before of like cleaning out a closet. In order to organize something, in order to organize your closet that's really messy, you have to pull everything out, dust into the corners, maybe rearrange the shelves, and then decide what you want to keep and what you want to put away. So you kind of have to like make a mess in order to redo it. So I mean, it's really scary. Point. And then I think more practically, always assuming the best intentions. A pastor has 8 million things on his or her plate, depending on the church environment or what's going on, or the types of people you serve, that type of thing. So it might just be a simple lack of time or a challenge to show me why, right? So I think it's always a good a good approach is to never assume that your ideas are the best ideas just because they're yours. But to be, not saying that would be the case, but to, make a good case, appeal to whatever the pastor really finds important, and then whatever the case may be. That's kind of my impression.
Yeah, no, that's a good, I think, roundup of a lot of the reasons. So first of all, you said change. People are resistant to change. I think largely because what you said, change, it introduces a period of transition, of instability. It sometimes is more work, or things have to slow down before you can speed up again, so there's efficiencies involved. There's also what you said. What was the second one you said?
Making a mess, cleaning up the closet.
Right. So it's again more work to get to where you want to go, I think. But I think where you ended up is where I want to go today too, because the assumption, first of all, when you're in your little role, and I've had this at jobs I've had before, where you see everything very clearly in your little scope, and it seems so obvious that this is what you should do. This is going to be a great change. This is the right decision. But of course, your boss and your pastor, or whoever it is, has to take into account a lot of other things. And so, first of all, with entering into it with the humility that you don't know the full picture necessarily, and so there may actually be reasons that this new thing might not be the right option. This change might not be good right now, or the right change. And so humility is a really important part of that. So I think sometimes we go into it and just assume, oh, they're stuck in their ways. They're just, don't understand all the value of these new things. They don't like change. Maybe they personally just don't like these things. So they have a personal bias against, again, maybe it's a new technology or tool or something, a new approach that you want to try. They just personally don't like it. And some of those might be true, and that's important to recognize. But it's often not the full story. So, like we said, sometimes there's a part of the picture we don't see when we go to any of these things, or to go to propose these things to our bosses. But I think also we have to look at our own biases within that. So not only do not see the full picture, but there's definitely, I think, especially, I'm guilty of this often, that we think newer is better. So we have a bias toward the new. So we think a new way is going to be better than the old way. And it's not necessarily the case. And a lot of leaders, our bosses, pastors, have the wisdom to know that they've tried new things in the past and it actually worked out worse, or it didn't end up working very well. So it's important we don't come in with just thinking that new is better. But of course, if we know that what we're doing isn't working that well, we need to have the courage to try something new a lot of times if we think it will improve things. But I think sometimes we're just changing without intention. So it's just new, it's better because it's new. Or we don't really know what we're trying to fix. We just know we can't keep doing what we're doing. So those are good things to recognize in ourselves of maybe what's motivating us. A lot of times, and this is, a lot of the people that institute change or sort of instigate change in an organization are the younger folks, because they tend to be more open to those things, or they just tend to be more naturally early adopters of things. But and again, particularly when it comes to technology, which is, this is our lens often here at Flocknote, where we're helping someone who likes the idea of Flocknote and it's going to help them improve communications at their church. But now they're like, how do I get my boss to be open to this? They don't want to do it, or they don't want to text our people, or they don't want to change how they've been doing things. So that's a common experience for us, obviously, in the way we end up experiencing this. But a lot of times, that person is just an early adopter in general. So they're more open to taking a risk on something new or doing something that hasn't been proven that well yet, but it's very fresh and it seems exciting. So our bosses may not have those same, motivations or just natural inclination to try something new. And that's okay too. But I think, so this is the biggest takeaway, I think, for everybody when we talk about this, or to think about when you're proposing something. I often find that our boss or our pastor is actually right when they say, I don't think we need that. And a lot of the time is because, or at least we haven't proven ourselves yet that it merits them taking a risk on it. And what I mean by that is we haven't told them why we want to make the change, and we haven't shown how the change is going to impact something that they care about. And so that my biggest tip for you, if you're trying to institute something new, is number one, you have to start with your purpose. So we're not just changing for change's sake or adopting something new because it's new, but what's the purpose? What do we want to achieve by doing this? So a lot of times our boss has the wisdom to know that, like, if there's not a reason behind this, it's probably not going to work that well. If we're not clear with our intention of what we want to achieve, we probably won't achieve it, If you aim at nothing, you hit that every time, right? You hit nothing. And I think so that's step one, is what are you trying to achieve, and make sure you're clear to that. But two is you have to speak to the heart of your leader. So what do they care about? It might not be the same things that you care about, but you have to show them that the change you want to make is meaningful to them, that it will help something they care about. Because again, it might not be enough for them to do something new for news because it's new. Sometimes that's enough, but a lot of the times they want to know more than I don't want to change unless this is going to really solve a real problem that we have. So you have to speak to their heart and start with what's meaningful to them. So I think about, again, a common example where someone comes in and says to their pastor, hey, Father, we'd really love to implement this new tool called Flocknote where we can text all of our members. It's going to be great. It's a new way to communicate. I think everyone's going to really love it. And he gives you resistance because he doesn't understand, well, I don't text. Maybe he doesn't like texting. He doesn't see how this is going to connect to anything that matters to him. And so the answer is no, we're not going to do that. But if instead you go in and you said, Father, you mentioned that one of your goals this year was to get more people to show up to, say, confession or holy days of obligation or something, right? And you say, yeah, I would love that. That would be amazing. That's something I'm really passionate about. And you say, well, what if I could show you that by sending a text message reminder the night before one of those things, we could double attendance to that the next day? Now you're talking in a language that means something to them. Because now it says, okay, well, if that's true, if you could really do that, then now I'm interested. And so if you have to start with the why, and you have to speak in terms of what is meaningful to them. Like, what's going to motivate them? So what's a pain point they have? What's a problem they need solved? What is something that they're passionate about achieving? And then you have to show them that the technology will actually achieve that, or else maybe you shouldn't do the technology. Maybe you haven't shown that it's worth making a change. Maybe you shouldn't do something new until you figure out that it's going to actually be better than the old way.
Yeah, well, that was kind of my thought too, was appealing to, I mean, yeah, you just have to appeal to something that will appeal to them, right? It's like what you said. Everybody's different. Pastor has to consider all of these different things. So to say, okay, who is this pastor? Who are this pastor's friends in ministry? Like, what are they doing? Is there a church near us, or that they know or that they talk to, who are doing something similar, right? It doesn't even necessarily have to be, email and texting. It can be really anything, right? But then also, I mean, like you said, what matters to them? And everybody wants to save time and save money, but you can't just say, "Oh, this is going to save me time and save me money." It's like you gotta show me how.
Right, and then follow through and show it. And so you say, "Look, I'm going to try this. I'm going to come back to you in a month or 2 months. I'm going to show you how it changed or had this effect, or whatever. You need to be able to measure it and show that it happened. If you can do that, they're going to be way more open to trying this something new, right? If you can't, then now well, we shouldn't do that new thing anyways, and your boss's hesitancy was probably the right instinct in the first place. So, a few tips for you there. Hopefully that helps if you're ever, proposing something new within your work at your church, and you have to convince some other people. Remember, be intentional with what you want to achieve with it. Make sure it explains how it's going to do that, and then speak to what they're passionate about. What do they care about? What are the pain points and problems and passionate things that they have in their lives that this is going to fix or address or help in some way, and you'll have much more success.
Yeah, awesome. Well, that's a great topic for today. Again, we hope you enjoyed it. Before we go, don't go anywhere. Of course, we're going to bounce it over to take a listener question with our People Got Church Problems segment. Okay, today's question is from our friend Father Dave, and this is a Finding No show first, because this is an audio question that Father Dave called in. We're super appreciative of this, so we're going to we'll listen to it first, and then on the hotline, yeah. So we'll play that first, and then we'll get an answer to Father Dave. So here goes.
Hi, this is Father Dave Snyder calling. I'm the interim rector at the Church of the Good Shepherd in Pittman, New Jersey. And I watched the podcast Finding the 82% on Monday. It was excellent, outstanding. And it stimulated and encouraged me to do a survey of our Flocknote congregation. We have 192 people signed up for Flocknote. And when we did a survey, we found that 80 of those 192 are what we would consider to be active members of the parish. And it really surprised me, and I wondered what your thoughts were about that. It's certainly well in excess of the 7.2% you indicated. We were just surprised to find that we had that high a percentage. I think it's like 42% of our Flocknote subscribers are active members in the church. So any thoughts you have would be greatly appreciated. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. Great question, Father Dave. And yeah, thanks for hitting up our hotline. It's a lot of fun. It's great to hear your voice and to get the question in that format. So I encourage other people to give that a try as well. We just got that up and working. So I hope that you guys will use that. So yeah, great. This was a great experiment. I love when pastors get practical. You can tell like the gears are turning for Father Dave, and he's going out and actually applying it, which is wonderful. So he's looking at his, in this case, he was looking at their Flocknote list of 192 people, I think he said. And when they studied it, they found that 80 or about 40% or so of those were what they called engaged. So a few things to think about. That's in general a really good finding, Father. So I think that's you should feel good about that, I think. But there's a few things to maybe consider as you analyze this, or as maybe other churches do the same thing. So I think the first big picture, when you talk about the 7%, it's definitely more the case in bigger congregations. So most of this study would have been done in parishes. Again, this was a Catholic study, but in most of the average parish size, you're looking at 1,000 families or something like that. So thousands of people that are in the community. And so the bigger you get, the more it's going to tend towards these numbers. If you have a smaller community, like 192, if that's the total number, it's going to be, you should probably see a higher level of engagement, just because the nature of smaller groups tend toward higher engagement, because that's just how humans are. So the smaller group, the higher the engagement is. The bigger it gets, the more it's going to tend towards this kind of distribution of different levels of engagement. So that's one thought. So as you grow bigger, you may see it tend more towards that. Another thing is realizing that maybe the 192 that are in Flocknote might not be all of your members. So when they did this study, they're looking at all of the records at a parish and saying, like, these are all the people that are technically, registered or members at our parish, however they sort of, qualify that. But it could be just people that were baptized here, people that were married here, people whose families have been here a while, but they might have family members that no longer come anymore. So those family members may not be in Flocknote if you haven't put all of your members in Flocknote. So more churches are putting all their members in Flocknote, which is great because you can track all of this information and use it as a member management system. But if you've just been using it more for communication and maybe you don't have all those people in there, then your denominator there of 192 might not be your full representation. So that would be another thing to consider, and not just for you, Father Dave, but anyone who's doing this is looking at that denominator. And then, of course, making sure that what we mean by engaged, which is kind of a vague term, we might mean different things by that. So in the study, when we talked about this 7%, we're talking about 7% do about 90% of the giving, 7% do about 90% of the volunteering. So it's the vast majority of people, and most of those are the same group, although they're not exactly the same. But it's the 7% that do almost all the giving and all the volunteering. So again, how you qualify that may change your number you have in there. But I'll give one more thought to that, because it's another important one, is that because we've seen this with a lot of churches we work with, depends on what phase your church is kind of going through. Because you could certainly imagine how, let's say you have 100% of what you call your members. And then you have and this kind of goes back to that denominator question of the 192, or what's the count of your total members, and how you qualify that. Because as a church, so the early phases of this sort of this beginning of this skew, where you have more people engaged and more people getting less engaged, the 82% that are drifting out of the church. With this part of the shift, if you're in a later phase of the 82% shifting out of the church, so if a lot of your 82% have already left, in other words, then what you're left with are the 7%, which are still really engaged and less likely to leave. And so it depends on, in other words, it depends on how many of your 82% are still coming or not. So if you have a lot of your 82% already gone, and maybe you're not counting them anymore as part of your community, then having a higher percentage of engaged people might just mean that you've already had a lot of the less engaged people leave. So that's one way to get a higher percentage of engaged people, is to have all your less engaged people leave. But that's not what we want, of course. We want more of the less engaged people to come back in. So that's just another thought, is where are you at in the life cycle of this shift? If you're in the later stages where a lot of the 82% have shifted out, then that's going to make your percentage of engaged people go up if you're no longer counting those people as part of your community. But if you're having success of bringing those 82% in, then of course that would be another way to see the percentage go up. I would think one key I would look at, and of course it depends on where you're at and what the demographics are in your particular community, but one thing I would look at is what's your age distribution, to know if, like, which part of the phase are you in, or how are we doing overall. Because a lot of churches, it's a disproportionate number of young people and members' children no longer coming and attending anymore, and so what you have, of course, is a skew toward the older population. So you could look at, one trick I do is just look at, like, if you look at the population of your church and compare its demographics to, you can use the U.S. general population. It's about the same everywhere, but it actually works out pretty evenly, where if you look at So one trick, like when you on Sunday, have somebody count 20 people go through the door. You can of course expand this or do it multiple times or do it on 100 people if you want, but count 20 people going through the door. You should have 5 people who are under 20 years old. Of those 20, you should have 5 people who are between 20 and 40. You should have 5 people who are between 40 and 60, and you should have 5 people who are over 60. So it generally breaks down about like that. So if you want to know how your population is skewing, is it skewing too old? Or again, if you have more young people, that's even better. It means you're ahead of the curve because they're going to all keep growing and getting older, hopefully, in your community. But again, so count 20 people. 5 of them should be 0 to 20. 5 of them should be 20 to 40. 5 of them should be 40 to 60 years old. And 5 of them should be 60 and up. And so generally, you can kind of guess pretty good just looking at folks about which bucket they would be in. So count 20 and put a little tally in each bucket, 0 to 20, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, and 60 plus, and see about how it breaks down. And so if you got 5 in each bucket, then you're tracking right along with the general population in the U.S. If you've got more younger people, then you're probably ahead of the curve. If you've got more older people, then you're probably more on the later phase of the 82% drifting out. And in that case, you still need to address some things. So it does mean you got to dig in further on these things. But Father Dave, it's wonderful analysis and great that you're jumping in and asking those questions. And I hope more churches do that so you can really come to terms with how are we doing with this huge drift of the 82% out of the church. And what is it for you? Is it 82 and 7? What are the percentages for you anymore? It would be a great study to do as a church.
Yeah, awesome. Well, yeah, thank you again, Father Dave. Before we go, one last thing, of course, as always, we're going to kick it over to our friend Liz and find out where Uno is today.
Hey friends, did you know that sheep get along with cats? I didn't know that, but apparently they do, because this week, Uno was spotted with this kitty, Joan Trout from Fort Wayne, Indiana, and Joan is Uno's helper at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton Catholic Church. That's amazing. Thank you so much, Trisha, for sending us this photo. It made our day. Now, if any of you listening or watching find Uno, snap a photo and send it to us at howdy@findinguno.com, and we may feature you in a future episode. That's all we got for you today. We'll see you next time on the Finding Uno Show. Bye-bye.